Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anza and I'm an expert in security, defense, and sports for social change. I'm also a very proud alumni of the PAK-U.S. Alumni Network. It brings me great honor today to be able to host the PUAN talks. This particular talk is very, very close to my heart because it resonates with the kind of work that me and a lot of like-minded individuals who are PUAN alumni have been doing. So the topic for today is going to be promoting sports for inclusiveness and tolerance. And joining me today, I've got a very esteemed panel, starting with Sana Mahmood, who happens to be a dear friend, a mentor, and someone we all should be looking up to in terms of being a champion for women's rights and sports for female athletes. She's also the project manager at Right to Play Pakistan and has led the team Pakistan for a lot of for basketball as well as football for back in the day. So a national athlete, and Sana's joining us. Then we've also got Dr. Umar Hussain. He's a PhD researcher at Texas A&M University. Someone extremely learned and brings a lot of empirical evidence to the table that we're going to be discussing in the context of today's topic today. And Mr. Tughral Ali, he is an experienced financial inclusion expert with an avid interest in sports and outdoor activities. So we're very honored to have all three of you here. And I'm going to open today's conversation with Sana. Right, Sana, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me, Anza.
Right, so let's get to the point because this is a topic that requires a lot of attention from people. UNESCO has been recognizing sports as an essential instrument for development and peace as it transcends borders and societal differences. Now, I know for a fact that Right to Play has been championing for this as well. How exactly does Right to Play's mandate tie in with the topic today?
So first of all, Anza, thank you very much to you and the Pakistan-U.S. Alumni Network for inviting me for this. And as you said, it's not only an important topic, but it's also one close to my heart because I have been involved in sports myself. And because of that, I do see firsthand the impact that sport can have on an individual's life. And I'm very fortunate to work for an organization like Right to Play that recognizes this, acknowledges this, and then uses the power of sport to improve children's lives. So one of the ways in which we do this is by empowering children through play. Instilling in them the necessary life skills that we refer to as an athlete yourself. You may be aware, once you're playing sports, you're able to communicate more effectively, become a better negotiator, be a better team player, learn essential things like time management, discipline, coordination, collaboration, conflict resolution, and a variety of other skills that are so transferable in every field of your life. And so our main purpose is not to create elite athletes out of these children that we work with, but rather to give them the experience that play and sports offer. In Pakistan, especially, as well as multiple countries around the world where Right to Play does work in the Middle East and Africa, we work primarily with marginalized communities. So these children don't have the luxury to have the exposure that children from private schools or high fee paying schools do. And these children don't have the luxury also to participate in extracurricular activities. So they are not able to reap all the benefits that such platforms offer. So simply by just participating in play-based experiential learning activities where we follow it with a discussion, we really make it structured, we really make it intentional, we make the learning aspect very intentional, children are able to continuously participate in such games and then reflect on what they've learned, and then have the opportunity to practice that with their peers, amongst classmates, within their school, at their homes, and within their communities. And over time, we see that there is a gradual behavior change, and that has a ripple effect, to their communities, to the larger society that they live in. And so, not just improve life skills, better confidence, but just holistic child development for that particular individual who is able to contribute in a more positive manner. And because of these discussions on teamwork, on cooperation, etc., we're able to focus on things like differences, or what brings us together, what makes us one, shared goals. And that also then leads towards inclusion and peace building. So what we've seen is a very positive impact in the communities that we work in. In Pakistan, we work primarily in Sindh, KP, and Islamabad. But like I said, with the most marginalized, and we're able to see the impact just like that.
Right, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm a witness to this. I've been an alumni of some of Right to Play's programs, and the kind of work that we've done on ground, especially in Sindh areas like Liari, I have seen the change happen within weeks. I mean, I'm still in touch with a lot of these girls, and it's incredible how even kids that were previously prone to gang violence have now found an outlet where they can channelize all this energy in a more positive manner. But our work was more on ground. Now let's talk about someone who's looking at things from a purely academic perspective. So, Mr. Umar Hussain, my question to you is: I'm aware that you did choose your PhD research with sports as a theme. What are your observations so far?
So I have conducted, you can say, a lot of research in different areas, including sport for development, including sport marketing, and looking more at sociological factors about how sport can be a mean to enhance, you can say, community development. Right now, for instance, right now in the US, we are working upon projects related to how sports can be used for different communities integration. And looking that in a more different scenario, right now I'm working with some organization in Qatar and trying to understand how, for instance, South Asian men from, especially who get involved in cricket, they go to these Middle Eastern countries and they participate in cricket there. So we're trying to understand their lived experiences, that how they get integrated in society through sports. So sports has a lot of benefits, as Sana also mentioned about some of them, which are psychological as well as sociological. So looking at that, we have also tried to understand some issues related to women, specifically in Pakistan, trying to understand that what are the social cultural barriers which can, you can say, affect women participation within the Pakistani scenario. So there are different areas of sport which I tried to study and understand, that how sport as a phenomena could be used to enhance marginalized community sport participation, as well as what are the sociological and as well as psychological outcomes of sport. As well, I try to understand, you can say, what is the marketing outcome of sport, or you can see the business development outcomes of sport, how it can affect the economy overall. So I try to understand that, you can say, more looking at theoretical view about different theories that can affect sport and how it can affect the practice at the end.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Umar Hussain. And we're going to hear a little more about your academic insights as we move on today's conversation. But you spoke about something that's very important in terms of sports. So, becoming financially inclusive, right? So a lot of times, sports personnel here, athletes, do not look at careers in sporting, right? So we see a lot of dreams that are shattered. Also, in terms of gender, there are a lot of culture and norms that come into play. For example, I remember as a young girl when I used to do kickboxing, or even like pursuing a dream for the national team, it was always looked down upon, because we were we were told to, rather participate in girly sports like volleyball, for instance. So, Mr. Tughral Ali, keeping our societal norms and expectations in mind, let's now talk about financial inclusion. How can sports be a means for financial inclusion as well in the scenario that we have in Pakistan?
Thank you, Anza. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. So I think there are a couple of things that I can think of which I'd like to share. I think the inclusion aspect is not an immediate one. It's something that shows up in the long term, but how you get there is very important. So the first point that I want to make is that on a sports field, everyone is equal. You know, the rules are laid out, they're very clear, and assuming that nobody's bought off the umpire, you know, if you put a football in there, it doesn't matter, you know, if the kid who's playing it is from some, you know, posh sector in Islamabad or from a slum somewhere in some of the smaller cities. When they're on the sports field, they are equals, and they're only separated by ability and by passion that they bring to the game. So the effect of that is really for that kid that's coming from the excluded part of you know, the financial network, gets this shot at sort of, you know, being, you know, somebody who can make a difference on that sports field. It has a feedback effect on the level of confidence, the exposure that kid gets, and of course, if they qualify for a certain level, they can play national, they can play international. So that's the kind of exposure that has a long-term effect. That's the first thing. The second is, we see this less now, but back when I was in HSN, we had this, you know, this tradition where we used to go to play, you know, sports in different parts of the country and also across the border. So we'd take teams and we'd go off for, you know, a cricket or a hockey or a football series to India. They would come over to us. And now, of course, HSN isn't exactly a place that requires inclusion, but this was pretty much the culture, you know, in the 80s and the 90s. I think we've lost a little bit of that. What that also does is it breaks down the barriers of exclusion, because it gets, once again, kids coming from different backgrounds, from different geographies, different religions, different cultures, playing together on that same field. It gives them that brilliant opportunity to get to know each other. So again, it shows up in their development. It shows up in the sort of opportunities they choose to pursue. And lastly, this is something that should be the case, but is not, is what you alluded to, where, you know, we just, beyond cricket, honestly, I don't think that there is any league in Pakistan that actually supports sports as a profession.
Right. We're going to be talking about it, Mr. Tughral, or moving on in our conversation. But thank you very much for you know, the pertinent points that you did make. My next question is going to be for Sana. Sana, now you've been an international athlete for some time now, and you've led Pakistan, the team, to victory many times. Now, what kind of observations did you make during your captaincy to perhaps witness sports as a means of promoting tolerance and inclusiveness, not just for marginalized, but when someone makes it to the team? What is the power of sports?
Like I said earlier, Anza, you know, I've experienced it myself. So I think I'll share a couple of examples because I've had the opportunity to play within South Asia, represent Pakistan teams abroad. And, you know, even though you're going against those countries, you know, and backstage, we're all living together, basically. We live in the same hotels, we eat in the same dining halls. So you get a lot of off the field chance to interact with people from, you know, the teams from India or Afghanistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, etc. All the countries that we played with in this region. And, you know, because you have that informal time together, you're able to appreciate where they come from, and a lot of our contexts are very similar. So just being in South Asia itself makes you realize how similar our experiences are, especially as women playing sport. And then also our love for the game brings us together. So one of the best things that I've seen is people exchanging jerseys, people exchanging, you know, mementos, souvenirs from their countries. I still have a shirt that belongs to a player in India. And I have a pair of shorts that I took from the captain of the Maldives team, and we exchanged these years ago, right? But the point in saying that is perhaps it's looked at oddly if a Pakistani is to wear a jersey that has India on it. And you might also think that it was not the most patriotic act, but it represents something different for me because it's my personal experience that I've had representing my country as a captain and have been able to exchange this piece of clothing, which is valuable and special in that sense. So I think those are like some of the small examples of how you can break down barriers.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you here, but we've got a very interesting question from someone watching right now. His name is Rana Ahmed Nawaz Tipu. Now, he also wants you to comment on how can we use this forum for promoting cultural heritage. You gave some brilliant examples of the captain of Maldives, exchanging shorts, and so on. So
exactly like that, because I think sports creates that platform, right? It's the right hook to bring people together. So if I want the interest of youth, maybe by presenting them a sports event, I can get them all together, and then once they're on this common stage, common platform, then we can talk about things. For instance, if we have interprovincial tournaments, that's what it essentially does. You bring people from Sindh, KP, Balochistan, Punjab, everybody together, and then you're able to also put people from different backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different languages on a common platform. And they do end up sharing, especially in this informal space where they're interacting before games or after games or in the dining halls, in the hostels, where they interact and share their language, their experiences, their cultural heritage, outfits and music. So I don't know if anybody's ever had the experience of living in a girls' hostel. That's what we love doing. We love playing music. We love playing music and learning from different people and different teams. We love looking at their cultural dance and all of these different things that we can do together. And I think it only breaks down those barriers and that prejudice we have, or like those preconceived notions we have about other people. And it only brings us closer as a community.
Right. Thank you, Sana. Now,
I would like to add here upon, so it is a very important question raised by, I guess, Ahmed Nawaz here, about like how cultural heritage could be, you can say we can secure cultural heritage through sport. And I have done a lot of research in this area. So one of the things which could be done is promoting the indigenous sport. Right now, if you're following India, so they have right now Pro Kabaddi League, which has been also featured in Amazon recently, and they are earning a lot of money through that. And there was a time when Pro Kabaddi League was watched more than even IPL. So promoting the local sports such as Kho-Kho, Kabaddi, and other indigenous sport would be one mean to enhance cultural heritage. And secondly, the other mean is sport tourism, which is currently lacking. We do not have policy for sport tourism, such as the polo matches, which happens within the Kyrgyzstan, using sport as a technique.
Yeah, Buskashi, which is their local version. It's played all over Central Asia.
Yeah, so that could be used to, you can say, secure your cultural heritage as well, and could be a mean for enhancing the revenue for Pakistan as well, which is currently not being focused of the current government or previous governments have not looked upon sport tourism specifically. How, and we see in Sindh as well, there are a lot of localized sport which are being played, which could be promoted internationally to gain revenue. So that could also help revenue generation as well as securing your own cultural heritage. And right now we see India is doing a lot on it, specifically promoting their Kabaddi League, which is becoming a really big phenomenon within the Indian context.
So may I add that there have been efforts to do so. And I think just to get back to our original participant who asked the question, I think the biggest push needs to come from people. So people like yourself who are working in this field or doing research, they are aware of the importance of it. I've been approached by many event management companies who have proposed this idea, and they're trying to, make this Kabaddi League, but it isn't capturing that kind of attention, as you said, that it might have done so in India. So I think it really comes from the people as well. And earlier, as Tughral Saab mentioned, that cricket has become sort of the forefront, and it has always been. So it's not leaving a lot of space for other sports, let alone indigenous sports. So I really think that we have to go back to our people, and it has to come from the people for it to gain that kind of traction and for it to stay, for the media and the right kind of sponsors to also inject their money into that kind of sport. So I think everybody needs to kind of work together for it to come full circle before we can start promoting those indigenous games.
Right, absolutely. We've got another question from the audience, but before we move on, I'd like to go back to Mr. Tughral, and he had said something very interesting about cricket. Now, cricket in Pakistan is huge, and I mean that not just in terms of the leagues that we have, but in Pakistan, a lot of athletes are getting the most financial rewards when they're playing in cricket leagues, even if it's domestic cricket. All over the world, Mr. Tughral, athletes have been advocating for equal pay between genders, between sports, etc. How can this be eliminated?
So you're talking, let me understand the question. You're talking about elimination of gender parity or about promoting sports
Both,
in general?
actually. Sports, like for example, in a lot of parts of the world, same female footballers do not get paid as much as their male counterparts. In Pakistan, we don't just have those issues, we also have issues related to sports. So let's say someone who's on a judo team will get paid peanuts compared to someone who makes it a part of the cricket team, even women for that matter.
So great point. And this goes really to the heart of why Pakistani sports has taken a big downturn. And I don't use those words lightly. There was a time that we were dominating in squash, in hockey, in several other sports. Then cricket was one of them. That transition happened somewhere towards the end of the 80s, somewhere toward mid 90s, where marketing dollars started driving the focus. So what we saw was an erosion of sporting facilities available to the general public. We saw elimination of sports grounds from schools and colleges. And the result of that was that cricket, which was at that time, we had won the World Cup and it sort of garnered a lot of support from the public, became the center of marketing focus, and all the money started being poured into that. Sports cannot survive without government patronage. It needs support from the government to subsidize the cost of entry for the general public. That's where you find the sportsmen. They're not going to be coming from elite schools. They're going to be coming from the general public, which wants to play, but doesn't have the grounds, doesn't have the means. So point number one, I think that the government needs to take ownership over here of providing that facility, making sure those grounds are not sold off for new plots, new housing schemes. Number one. Number two, the parity as well between genders is something that has to be enforced. Again, male sports tend to draw more eyeballs. Simply because that's a traditional flow, right? It's not because female sports are not interesting to watch. It's just that traditionally men have actually captured all the attention. But we need the government to step in over here and create some sort of baseline pay scales. At least don't go below those pay scales. I mean, you can differentiate between different players, but yeah. So I don't think that this problem can be solved without some level of regulation coming into play.
Right, thank you so much. And Sana, we've got an interesting question from the audience. Saima Afzal has asked, I have a special student who is excellent in swimming. How can I promote him to take part on an international level? And she's a PUAN senior member, presently working as a principal and also a sports Sindh Olympics gold medalist herself. So any idea of
Yeah, thanks for this question. I just had one clarification. Is this a special needs student?
I think that would be
so interestingly, Pakistan, the Special Olympics committee within Pakistan is actually quite active. And then if you are based in, I believe you must be in Sindh somewhere, then I can, it's about knowing the right person. Unfortunately, the problem is a lot of people come to us with questions like, where can I send my child? Where can I do this? So it's, not a lot of consolidated information exists, unfortunately, but we can find you the right person and connect this person with you. So I think I can share this information with you, Anza, and then if the moderators of this event can share it with Saima, who has asked us this question. We can do something about it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sana. Now moving on. Saima has also made another comment saying that sports exchange programs are also a good idea to promote sports at school and college level. Agreed. Now, moving on a little bit more about an seemingly uncomfortable topic related to our theme for the day. Now, Dr. Umar Hussain, sir, in your recent research piece, you have challenged the France Senate voting to ban hijab in sports via empirical evidence. Could you please elaborate on this?
So, Anza, it is like this. So taking more, you can say a more feminist, or you can say post-structural feminist approach. My perspective and a lot of researchers' perspective is that we have to take, we have to think about the social culture barriers which women have, and the main purpose is to enhance women sport participation. Uh, if they want to wear anything, that's up to them, and we have to empower them according to their needs. And we see within the question you asked from Tughral as well, that how we can enhance sport participation. We have to think about social culture barriers of a certain country, of a certain culture. That also affects, for instance, Muslim women who are currently participating within the Western countries. Most of the Muslim women want to wear hijab when they are in a Western society. As I know that many Muslim women across the globe do not participate with hijab. But within the Western societies, we see that a lot of Arab women, or women coming from Syria, women coming from Afghanistan even, they want to participate in sport with hijab. And recently, French Senate voted against hijab. They tried to ban hijab because they considered that to be something which is patriarchal, or something which supports Islamic radicalism. So our argument is that basically that to enhance Muslim women's sport participation and to empower them so they can participate more in sport. So it's important to, you can say, break those barriers and allow them to participate with hijab. So basically, we try to understand what are the determinants of why they wear hijab. So there are different reasons. There are not only religious reasons, but there are social reasons. For instance, a girl can wear hijab because she gets affected by her friends or her parents or her mother. So there are different social as well as you can say cultural reasons and her own attitude which affects them. So those reasons should be taken into consideration before making those policies at the policy level of banning hijab. So that was our argument, and we published that research recently. And as well, that is really much important because right now, different organizations, different companies, Nike introduced its Pro Sport hijab in 2018. Before that, there are a lot of other companies which were introducing Pro Sport hijab. So Muslim women overall globally is a very big market, which is estimated to be around about $73 billion market when it comes to hijab. So it is important to understand that perspective as well. For the business growth as well, it is important to target that specific market with women who want to wear hijab. And so that was basically the argument we had in that publication.
Right. Some very pertinent points made again. And ladies and gentlemen, I would, if you don't know who this person is already, look up Ibtihaj Mohammed. She is from America, wears a hijab, and has been world champion in fencing.
Gold medal.
So
Yeah,
that's,
she won gold medal. Yeah.
Yeah.
In Olympics.
So definitely, we have many such examples. So definitely, hijab or no hijab, we know one thing for sure, that women athletes, female athletes, should not be held back just because of the choice of clothing that they wish to wear on ground. Moving on, now, Mr. Tughral, we have seen that in Pakistan, a lot of sporting events have been publicized lately. There have been a lot of initiatives by the government as well in terms of encouraging sports. But Sana mentioned something important about sports diplomacy as well. How do you think, in your opinion, can the promotion of sports lead to more tolerance amongst nations? Are we in a position today to have a friendly cricket match with Afghanistan, for example, or with other nations? How can we come on the sports field together and create more harmony and tolerance?
Absolutely. I mean, Afghanistan, any other country, most welcome, and I think our going over there would be equally well received as well. I think sports plays a very crucial role in promoting peace and tolerance, especially between communities. There are some obvious reasons for it. Why does it promote tolerance? Is because there are a set of rules that every player must follow when they've stepped on that sports field. So you learn to respect rules. Second, if you're coming up from a background of sports, you've learned how to fail. You've fallen in the ground, you've gotten up again, you've shaken hands at the end of the game and wished each other, well. You don't take grudges off the field. Whatever you do, you play over there, but you play with it the right spirit. And this, the sportsman spirit is something, or sports person spirit is something that is emphasized again and again. So that's the part where the people who are participating in the sport, they tend to develop that character, which I think is a more inclusive, it's more tolerant, it's a friendlier character. I've done a lot of martial arts. Believe me, once you step outside the ring, they're the nicest people, simply because they know how to channel that aggression. And then secondly, the diplomacy side. It's a brilliant opportunity to get to showcase your culture, get to showcase your people, be hosts, invite people, invite the world to come to your country to get a taste of what is Pakistan all about, and get to go abroad and learn from other cultures, which is what I think isolation tends to bring out the worst in us. And I think sports opens up the world again to us. And I think if you look at what happened yesterday, the PSL final, it's not so much about the game itself. There were two brilliant teams that played. It's about what happened afterwards, the handshakes between Rizwan and Shaheen, the kind of camaraderie we got to see. That's what the world needs to see more of when it comes to Pakistan.
Right, absolutely. And being a martial artist myself, I can tell you this much. We did one of these, another funded program by the US consulate back in Karachi, and we called Angela Mae from DC. And believe me, her whole experience, I think you build ambassadors out of athletes. They're going to be doing more good for the country and for the image of the country, because the general public is not as receptive to politicians, but they're very receptive to athletes, because those are the real heroes that the youth looks up to. So that is definitely,
If I may just interject one point over there, Anza, the reason for that is because an athlete or watching a sport, you're seeing a story unfold. It has its heroes and the villains, and it has its challenges and the overcoming. That's what people connect to. People build an emotional connection with athletes, the sports that they're watching. And that's why it has that impact on the diplomacy as well. You want to see gladiators and heroes coming back from the ground.
Right, absolutely. And, moving on, Sana, we've got an interesting comment by, again, Saima Afzal. But before, building up on her questions, I would like to build up on another interesting premise as well. I've seen this happen. There is a tendency of bullying and harassment as well within sports, right? Within the fraternity as well. We see sometimes that a lot of senior athletes are not very open towards newer athletes because they feel threatened. For example, I know that I was reading some research paper. Australia has taken a very strong stance against bullying within sports in their country. I know New Zealand, America has been developing this inclusive sports framework. What are some of your recommendations, and what were some of your observations?
Well, thanks for the question, Anza, because I was going to shed some light on that myself after reading Saima's comment. So even though Tughral mentioned just now that, sport has that ability to bring us together, and, sportsmen and women are looked up to in that regard. But I think we have to separate what elite sport is, and then what, grassroots level sport or youth sports are. So I understand that that's what countries want. They're essentially wanting great athletes to represent their country, and it's all about excellence and performance. But at the other end, isn't it also just about the experience, right? When you're an 8-year-old, when you're a 12-year-old, you shouldn't be that obsessed with the excellence part of it. So I think that what we need as a country also is to have proper training courses for coaches, for youth coaches, people who are going to be working with these children. You must have seen coaches treat children unfairly, only pick out the ones who can play well, neglect and exclude the ones who aren't able to exhibit that kind of sporting ability. So you really need that kind of training to be a good youth coach, somebody who knows the essential elements of child protection, somebody who knows essential elements of gender equality and inclusion, and so that they with that lens, they're able to include everybody and make sure that everybody feels they're part of the game, they're involved, everybody is participating equally, because that's what as a young child you want, right? And if your experience in sport has remained positive as a child, you're more likely to grow up with a positive experience towards the game, and then either you're going to like I always say, if you're not going to play, you're either going to be somebody who invests money in sport, or you're going to be somebody who invests your media attention into sport, but you will be a contributing factor in these things. But if you've had a negative experience in sport, you're more likely to have a complete negative perception of the entire field of it as well. So I definitely think youth coaches, not anybody who is into sport should be a coach. We really need specialized, trained professionals to work with children. And then also we need, with our sporting bodies, I completely 100% agree with Saima that we need special care and special need for women. Women biologically have different needs. Women have other safety needs, and there is a lot of harassment in sport, sexual harassment and other kinds of harassment. And as she rightly mentioned, a lot of girls are unable to participate because their families are unhappy with the kind of chaperone. Yeah, they're unhappy with also the arrangements for women, like male chaperones. And that's, once again, we have a fewer number of qualified females to work as assistant coaches, as referees, as chaperones, as medical professionals. So we need more women in this field, more trained, certified women in all of these posts, so that female athletes feel safer traveling when it comes to these kind of tournaments. So I think these are just a couple of things, working on policies as well. I'm not sure whether even the PCB with their women's wing has a policy. I'm unaware of this. They might have something, but I've yet to see something in action, in writing, where a policy protects people, and then the awareness of that policy, that an athlete knows that if they are, even at the Pakistan Sports Board level, that kind of governs all the other sports, I have never seen excuse me, a policy that protects athletes, that where I as an athlete could feel confident to go and report something, right? So a policy has to exist for me to start taking action on. And then the awareness of that policy for all the coaches and athletes also has to be the secondary part before we can start making a change.
Right. Thank you, Sana. Mr. Umar Hussain. So, yeah. So now, how can more scientific research and publications from Pakistan that have more indigenous data presented in them, how can they be used as a tool for encouraging sports for inclusiveness and tolerance within Pakistan? Because I barely come across any research here.
So as Sana mentioned, she mentioned a very much important point about, like, first of all, about the grassroots level and understanding the policy change. And that policy change can only come through research, a proper research which can tell that what are the social taboos which can affect, for instance, women participation within the Pakistani scenario. Some social taboos are those taboos which could be only be, you can say, tackled or could be challenged at the local level. But we found that one of the biggest reasons girls from subcontinent are not participating in sport is because they have a fear of hymen rupture, that their hymen might get ruptured. So this is one of the issues, which is a very big issue in very much in the localized areas in Pakistan. So breaking those social taboos, those stereotypes, that's very much important. And that needs a bigger, you can say, approach. As Sana mentioned about Pakistan Sport Board policy, if you go, they have recently made a new constitution. Before that, they had only a 4-page constitution, which doesn't cover all of the aspects of sports related to how women participation could be enhanced. And there are some other elements which are attached to sports overall in the Indian subcontinent, in Pakistan as well. How sport is perceived to be very manly We recently did a study with girls from Gilgit-Baltistan and how they were participating in soccer and how they are being, you can say, labelized as lesbians, for instance, because they are participating in sports. So there are different stereotypes which are attached to sports, and that could be broken at the local level. And so that could be only broken through research. And if a proper research is conducted about what are the challenges girls are, you can say, facing at the localized level, as well as research overall in the field of sport marketing, sport branding, that how Pakistan.
Uh, Sorry to interrupt you here, but this is a very valid point that you're trying to make, and I want you to build up on the fact that in Pakistan as well, like for example, if I wanted to study sports journalism or sports management, sports marketing, we're not teaching those courses in university, at least not something that I'm aware of. So it's probably just a privilege that's available to someone that can afford to go abroad, or probably someone that by a very minute chance happens to get a Fulbright or a scholarship. What's your take on encouraging those kind of
So
programs?
right now, Pakistan, like LUMS, introduced one course at their bachelor level related to sport marketing, but there are different other aspects of sport, as you mentioned, that sport journalism, sociology of sport, psychology of sport, which is really much important for coaching aspects, which are not being taught. And if you want to develop a coaching program, as Sana mentioned, that we need to have a proper coaching program, you need to teach psychology of sport as a course in your curriculum. So right now we are not having it, as well as sport journalism, which is right now anyone becomes a journalist, a sport journalist. So he thinks in his own way. He does not know the theoretical background or the ethics of sport, and as well as sport marketing. Right now, the biggest trend which are happening right now within the South Asian and Asian context, that is esports. Esports is becoming a very big thing within Pakistan as well. There are a lot of esport tournaments, and understanding esport market and understanding esport aspects, that could be also right now in different universities in UK. Right now they are giving courses related to esports. So I guess those courses should be introduced in Pakistan, and that will help in building up, you can say, sport at the grassroots level, which is currently not being available, and HEC has not. They are right now thinking more in the tourism aspect, but sport could be also the sport tourism, as I mentioned before as well. That's you can say another course in itself. So there are different areas of growth within the Indian subcontinent where sport could be taught, and different areas of sport could be taught. Uh, Overall, sport management as a field, it is a very growing field. Within the North American context, we have even we have very less universities, which are there are not too many universities even in America which are offering sport management courses. But there is a growing trend within Australia, New Zealand. There's a growing trend within India as well. Right now in India, there are a lot of schools which are offering sport management courses. But that could be also the Pakistani government and HEC should also think about introducing sport management courses within Pakistani context.
Right, right. Perhaps and also exchange programs. About the coaching aspect, I'm going to ask Sana later on and talk about something very interesting. But moving on, I'd like to ask Mr. Tughral Ali first. Sir, now, what are some of your recommendations? Because you have a lot of experience in this area. What are some of your recommendations for the government? Which diversity and tolerance principles could be promoted through, let's say, physical education, through sports?
I think a lot of the points have been touched upon. So what I'll just say is more or less a summary of the most important ones that I picked up. I think there's got to be a national policy for developing sports. That's where we've got to start, because we've talked about the differences between provinces, differences between genders, and what are the facilities that have been made available to them according to these differences. So I think there has to be a national inclusion policy around sports that needs to come about, which the spirit behind which should be to make sports available to kids. It doesn't matter if this is somebody studying in an elite school or if it's somebody from a village, but everybody should have an opportunity to play. That's where I think the government should start by focusing. Number two, I really do feel that there is a challenge around real estate over here. And that challenge is that especially in the biggest cities, slowly we've seen sports grounds disappear over the last 3 decades. That has to stop. There needs to be government intervention and protection for these sports grounds. They need to be opened up. Don't restrict sports to big elite clubs, which require hundreds of thousands of rupees to just become a member. And, it's limited to like a few hundred people per city. Open these grounds up, protect these grounds, make these facilities available to the kids. Even if you can't go around and train everybody, at least let them play. And you'll still find the Wasim Akrams and the Jahan Sher Khans coming out of nowhere. And the third thing, I think the most important one, which I think Sana also alluded to, Umar's also talked about, is the approach to training. I mean, all of us have played some sport or the other on this panel. We know how bad habits, if they are learned earlier on when you've picked up a sport, they can kill your sporting career once you become competitive. So we need to get in those good coaches earlier on who can correct the basics of the game, teach what the game is about, the spirit, and groom these future stars. So I think those are the three most important things where I think the government can step in and make a difference.
That's very impactful, what you just said right there. Building up on the point on coaches, now I know Sana's been involved in trauma-informed coaching as well. And Sana, if you could just shed some light on what trauma-informed coaching is and why that's such an important part of sports for inclusiveness and tolerance.
So Right to Play has done a lot of work in this subject as well. Just the idea that there are children and there are people who have dealt with trauma in their lives, and I think many of us can relate to that and understand that as well, because we have internally displaced populations in Pakistan. We have people growing up in poverty-stricken households. We have people with, domestic violence and a variety of other issues that create trauma and create unrest. Gang violence, as you earlier mentioned. So psychological impacts on children, negative psychological impacts on children are immense in this regard. And so one such field of work, which refers to trauma-informed coaching, is basically talking about coaching these children in an intentional way so as to mitigate the effects of that trauma and make their experiences so positive. And some of the core strategies just off the top of my head is, creating rhythm and structure in their lives. So for instance, a child who lives in a broken kind of family, comes from a very drug-ridden or violence-ridden community, doesn't have predictability in his life. He's always worried whether he's going to wake up the next morning, whether he's fears for his life, whether he has access to food or shelter. He doesn't know what his day is going to look like, as opposed to another average child who knows that he's going to get up and have breakfast and go to school, etc. So because of this unpredictability, sports adds that predictability in their lives, and coaches are taught to give that person a safe space, because at least if nothing else is predictable, if nothing else is structured in his life, he knows that at 3 o'clock he has to go to football practice, and at 3 to 4 this is what he will do at football practice, and he will have that safe space to express himself, to be around people and mentors like coaches who are looking out for him. And over time we see that this is a great strategy to at least mitigate some of the negativity in their lives caused by the trauma that they have experienced. I'm making it sound very superficial and very basic, just in the interest of time, having to sort of wrap it up. But it is an entire study, and it has been found to have an impact on children, especially suffering from trauma and abuse.
Right. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I'm going to be taking your concluding remarks now. So if there are any more questions from the audience, please write to PAK-U.S Alumni Network, and maybe we can have individual answers for them later. Yes, Dr. Umar Hussain, say your concluding remarks.
Yeah, so my concluding remarks would be related to sport, because we have discussed a lot of good aspects of sport. So there are a lot of bad aspects of sport, and theoretically and by research it has been proven. And we have to think sport. We have to challenge those sport barriers which different communities face, And as Sana mentioned as well, our focus should not be as a country to focus upon the elite level sport. As a country, we have to focus more upon the grassroots level sport. And that will, you can say, at the end would lead to have a very good elite level sport as well. And my ending remark would be that as a country, we need to focus more upon sport studies, sport management, sport marketing, and how sport could be a mean to get revenue for a country like Pakistan, which is a developing country. So that would be my concluding remarks. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Tughral Ali.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think what I just like to say is that we come from a country which has a great sporting tradition. We've kind of lost our way in the last 2 decades or so. And I really, my message to everybody who's listening out there is bring that culture back. It makes us better human beings. I think it makes us a happier country. Let's shift our focus back to sports. And I'd like to request all the people who are listening, who can actually help out, with the policy making and the focus to actually pay attention to this part, because I think this is going to help de-radicalize the population as well.
Right. Thank you very much. Sana.
Thanks, Anza. I think just echoing what my fellow panelists have said, but also just to bring it back to the thing that for any actionable change, we need to make sort of targeted efforts. And what saddens me is if you're interested in promoting sport, then perhaps we need to start with a separate unit or a separate entity or even a separate ministry for that matter, some entity that is looking at these matters, right? So where do we go if some SIMA is asking us, where should I send my child for this student for Special Olympics? She should have that necessary information, and we don't have a platform where we consolidate all of this information, and it's not accessible to anybody. So and I know that the way that we got into sport is because we knew somebody who knew somebody, a random coach saw us play one of the days, and we were just lucky enough to be picked. But there are thousands of other people in Pakistan who have talent, who need to be picked. They just don't have the right platform. So if you're going to talk about promoting sport, we need kind of a central body to be looking after that. And then also just individual advice to, especially the women out there, just play a sport. As Tughral said, it makes us happier people. And as women, I think it just makes us stronger women.
Right. Thank you very much to the whole esteemed panel for joining us today. Thank you to PUAN Talks for arranging this. It has been an absolutely amazing experience listening to 3 experts from different walks of life and really talking about the power of sports. My 2 cents to today's discussion is going to be my only recommendation is that we really need to now look at sports on a very baseline level. So if the government is promoting the single national curriculum, why not make sports education or PE as compulsory as part of the curriculum because of the impact that it does create? And to leave you all with some food for thought, in the words of Nelson Mandela, and I quote, "Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to the youth in a language they understand, and sport can create hope where once there was only despair." Unquote. Take care of yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Keep us updated with your comments and feedback. That will be all for today. Thank you.